Okay.
Well, welcome to Coffee with a Purpose, everyone. This morning we've got our Coffee with a Purpose regular, Bill Ramage, coming, who is also wears many hats, one of which is chair of the Community Preservation Committee. And the committee's at a pretty crucial point in their work. So Bill has asked to come to Coffee with a Purpose and update us on everything that's going on. Bill also is pointing out that because pretty much he knows everybody here, we can kind of dispense with introductions. Although Anne or Annette, I don't know that I've met you. Maybe you might just like to introduce yourself and oh, she's on mute at the moment, but
Where'd she come from?
There we go. Can you hear
yeah.
me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. My name is Anne Arnett Grigley. Just a resident. This is my first coffee meeting that I remembered on a Monday morning. Yeah, I live in Natick Center, and that's all. Happy to see you all.
Awesome. That's great. Well, I'm glad you could join us. Cool. Um, Let's see. Well, so if we're going to dispense with introductions, I think I will just go ahead and turn it right over to you, Bill, and you can let folks know whether you want to take kind of questions along the way or speak for a little while. And I know you may have some slides that you refer us to, but we'll figure that out as we go along.
Okay, thanks, Doug, and thanks for having me. As Doug said, I'm the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. I've always wanted to do this. I'm here to talk about the CPA, the CPC, and the CPP. Now, with that said, let me translate.
Yeah.
My goal today is to provide you with a high-level overview of the Community Preservation Act, CPA, and how the Community Preservation Committee, CPC, is working to make the CPA funds available to the town. The Community Preservation Plan, or CPP, is a critical part of that discussion. So I will try to use the full names. At some point, I'll use the acronyms, and bear with me. So I wanted to give sort of a really high level first, then drop down a little bit, but keep it at 10,000 feet. So 30,000 feet, the CPA is an act that Massachusetts passed, which allows communities to add a surcharge to their surtax to their property bills, take that money and use it in areas, which I'll talk about in a minute, as defined by the CPA or the Act. The town of Natick appointed the Community Preservation Committee to be the body that develops the process, the plans, the way that we're going to review and evaluate, and then forward the projects that we like or that we want to fund to the town meeting, which is the final arbiter. The town meeting passed the act to be allowed in Natick. Town meeting set up the Community Preservation Committee. Town meeting gets to review and approve our projects. So that's the 30,000 foot level. So let me drop down a little bit. Hopefully I'll cover most of the, again, at the high level, most of the points, but jump in if you have questions because I may misstate things. I have a bad habit of doing that. And if you have a question, I can be happy to deal with it on the fly. So what's the Community Preservation Act? There are some 200 communities in Massachusetts, towns and cities that have passed this, used this act to develop a funding source for projects in their towns. We are one of the more recent ones, and it allows a town to assess between 1% and 3% surcharge on property tax bills, real estate taxes that the town sets. The money is segregated and made available to fund projects in the following 3 areas. And I want to go through this once, and then there's always questions about open space and recreation are evaluated separately, but they're one category. So open space protection involves acquiring, creating, and preserving natural spaces and resources, including their rehabilitation. And then outdoor recreation focuses on acquiring, creating, and rehabilitating land and facilities for recreational purposes. As I'll explain in a minute, that's one group or bucket or area that the CPA allows us to spend money in. Then there's community affordable housing, addresses the acquisition, creation, support, and preservation of affordable housing, along with its rehabilitation. And the third area is historic preservation, which entails acquiring and preserving historic resources listed on the state register or recognized by local commissions adhering to U.S. preservation standards. The CPA or the Act also mandates how funds collected by the town are spent. Specifically, each town must spend, and this gets into the pie chart thing if you want to try and bring it up. 10% of the money collected must be spent on open space / recreation, 10% on historic preservation. There's a slide that sort of shows this in a pie chart. 10% on community affordable housing. There's an additional 5% that can be used for administrative purposes. That's the little thing at the top. And then that big, what is that?
Purple.
Purple, thank you. 65% can be used for any of the categories except the administration. That's maxed at 5%. So minimums, each of the three categories, a large pot of money that can be used for any category.
Bill, we also have a question in the chat from Brindley. Are you going to be talking about the portion of the funds that get given to us from the state as opposed to what we collect through tax as well?
Yes, I'm not sure where I put that, but I'll do it now. In addition, there is a community preservation trust fund, I believe it's called, which is a tax that the state imposes on real estate transactions. That money gets divvied up across the state. And last year, I believe it was 18%. Don't quote me on the exact amount. That's on the slide called Community Preservation Trust Fund. That gets added to the amount of money that is collected locally and put into the pot, again, at the same ratios. So that is how the money comes in. It is segregated, at least on paper, by the town and reserved or preserved for CPA projects. The next thing I wanted to talk about is how did Natick get involved in the CPA? Martin can go back into the history before, going back to what, 2014 or 11?
Oh, way before that.
Yeah.
I think 2006 or 2007 was the first vote that we failed, and we took.
Yeah, if Sarah were here, she could talk to that. She was on that study committee the first time around.
In 2001.
Yeah.
That's correct. The state did pass it in 2001. Natick tried to get in early, seeing this as a real opportunity. I guess it was citizen petition back then as well, right?
Well, it was a town meeting vote, but
Right.
it was a
Anyway.
organized group that brought it to town meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Brindley, did you have a question? Or?
I was just going to say, since you were talking about history, that's one of the reasons why we finally passed it is the matching funds, because we were finally everybody was able to realize that we were leaving money on the table because we weren't a part of it, which we didn't realize, or it was hard to convince more town members to vote for it back then because they didn't see the leaving the money on the table. From the
So
state.
anyway, we did at the fall meeting in 2022 pass the act allowing a 1% surcharge. So Natick chose the 1% tax on real estate. Surcharge was collected beginning July 1, 2023, the 2024 fiscal year. In the first year, we collected about 1.2 million. In addition, that trust fund that I talked about kicked in another $200,000 plus. So that's the pot of money and how how Natick kind of bought into this, finally came on board and is now accessing that money. So the next issue is, what is the CPC, Community Preservation Committee, and what do they do? And the committee is the body appointed by the town to implement the Community Preservation Act in Natick. The CPC has 9 members, 5 are appointed by commission. This is all required by the act. 5 are appointed by commissions and authorities, and Natick chose 4. You can vary the numbers slightly, but we chose 4 at-large appointments that were made by the select board. So the committees are the Conservation Commission, the Historical Commission, Natick Housing Authority, the Planning Board, and Recreation and Parks. And then we are charged with developing a process to apply for funding, developing a process to review and evaluate projects submitted for funding, develop a process to forward the approved process to town meeting for approval. And we also have to apply with all of the town mandates. These slides get really busy, so Mike.
All right, I was just bringing up the list of committee people since you were naming them, but I'll take it away now.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Doug. The CPC is also the entity that is required to make sure we meet all the mandates of the Community Preservation Act. That involves public hearings, developing this community preservation plan that I'll talk about in a few minutes. And just all of with the town and the act requirements, there's a lot of red tape. This is government funding. It's your tax dollars. So as a result, there's a process to encumber those funds and dispense those funds, and it's can get convoluted. So the Community Preservation Committee is responsible for making sure that all happens. We started in February of 2024, spent the last 16 months or so developing, complying with the laws, having public hearings, having focus groups. We did a flash survey and trying to reach out to the town. We looked at all of the resources the town already has, like the 2030 plan and several others, and tried to put all that in this community preservation plan, which is the sort of the next topic, which is the document that captures all of this information. It's quite lengthy. Every town is required to do it. We looked at we borrowed a lot of stuff from towns. Towns are ahead of us, so we borrowed a lot of stuff from them and then massaged it to make it work for Natick. So our plan is 80 pages and growing, but a lot of that is pictures and an attempt to capture the details of what we do and how we do it. And I'm trying today to stay at a high level, so I will refer you to the plan at some point. So the purpose of the plan is to document and make available to the town's plan to implement the Community Preservation Act in our town. The plan is the last major hurdle that the committee has in order to accept applications for funding. And if you think about it, we started with nothing, and we have to develop a process for folks to apply for funds. We have to develop a process for us to evaluate them. And we, as I say, borrowed from other towns, but had to put it together and make it a Natick document. That's what's taken most of the 16 months. The plan we broke the plan down into several parts. One talks about the Community Preservation Act. Part 2 talks about the Community Preservation Act, project review and recommendation process, the details of how we solicit projects and evaluate them. Part 3 is a 5-year action plan. Part 4 is an annual report, which we don't have yet. We have one from our first year. And then we have definitions, acronyms, and appendices. And in the appendices, we put the criteria that we use to evaluate each project. Very detailed process. Spent a lot of time thinking, debating, how do we make a process that's transparent, fair, and allows us to differentiate between projects. So that was a lengthy process with lots of debate and lots of great input from the committee, by the way. Can't say enough about how fortunate we are in Natick to have such a strong committee. So again, high level, how do I apply for CPA funding? And we've developed a 3-step process. Again, government red tape, but it makes sense if you think about it. The first step is a letter of interest. So if you're interested in using CPA funds for something, just give us at a high level what you're thinking, how much you think it'll cost, what's your timeline. We run that through I didn't mention the Community and Economic Development. They are our sponsoring department. Amanda Lones has just been terrific at keeping us on track and moving us forward and getting these documents together. They have staff and can pull on resources within the town to identify whether or not the project meets the requirements of the law. So there are rules around what's eligible. That's the first cut by committee, by town staff. CPC members will be attending those meetings, but it involves legal counsel if we need it. And it's just to make sure the project is complete, that all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted. And that results in either yeah, you're good, submit your application, which is a lot more detailed, or you really need to tweak this, or if you add this, it might qualify, or it just doesn't qualify. I'm sorry, you can't do it. You cannot build, I don't know whether Rick is here. You cannot build an artificial turf field using CPA funds, period. It's in the law. So
Rick is here, yeah.
that I knew that I had to
I'm
say
here.
that.
I'm
Be the
here
first
in the
question
car.
Rick asked.
Bill, for that letter of interest, is there a form for that or a format? Or I know you said at a high level, but are there critical pieces to it?
Again, this is 99% done, but there will be a form on the Community Preservation Act website, web page that the town has put up for our activities. So that includes the plan, that will include the letter of interest, and then it's online. It has to be filled out online. It's a standard form the town uses for a lot of things. So it gets your name, address, what the project is, the basic information. And that, again, gets evaluated by professionals that, again, are not looking to evaluate the project. They're looking to make sure the project meets the legal requirements to move forward.
Ann's got a, I'm
Yeah,
sorry to
you go.
interrupt. Ann had a good question online. Do these applications have to come from a business or a nonprofit, or can they come from citizens, or?
There are sort of 3 main categories. One is a town department or commission can apply. A nonprofit can apply. And the third category is individuals, and the individuals, the hurdles are much higher. You can't just say, I think it'd be great to have a pickleball court somewhere in Natick. You have to identify the land, you have to get the landowner's approval, you've got to get the town Parks and Rec to agree and support it, and so on and so on. So there are rules on that. I believe they're detailed in the Community Preservation Plan document, which is 99% done. There's a draft in the online. It's any day going to be released in its final form, but it's not out yet. So that's the letter of interest. Then we ask the applicant to submit a funding request application, which would be more detailed, funding sources, estimated time frame, addressing the issues that we will be evaluating it on, and providing that information, again, online through the town. That document then is reviewed and evaluated by the Community Preservation Committee in public hearings. All of this information, I didn't mention specifically transparency, but that's been a big deal, a big part of all of this. The plan identifies exactly how we're going to evaluate the project, all known in advance up front. Here's the 14 general questions that we're going to ask you. And here are the 4 detailed ones, depending on which category you apply for. So that's all available in black and white on the in the plan, detailed in the plan. So the application, again, making sure that meets the requirements, the legal requirements. Then we review it, kind of like FinCom does in a public hearing. We'll invite the project folks that want a project evaluation team or project team, I forget what we call it, to come to the Community Preservation Committee meeting. We ask questions, they answer them, they might do a presentation, and then we vote in public at some point later on in a public meeting on the different projects. And then if go
And
ahead.
then after that, it has to go before town meeting.
That's
before-
my next point.
Yeah.
If the Community Preservation Committee thinks the project is worthy and recommends it, the committee does not fund it, the town meeting has to review and approve it. The town meeting has 3 choices. They can accept the project as submitted. They can accept the project with a lower dollar amount, or they can reject the project. And they will be reviewing each and every project separately, kind of like what they do with some of the budget stuff. It gets separated and down. So if we have 10 projects, there will be 10 sections on the in the warrant and in the motion, I guess it would be. I'd say there's something else about transparency or it also goes through the same process that anything else does. So we go through FinCom, we go through an appropriate committee. And so we'll be presenting it, or the applicant will be presenting at FinCom as well. So it's the full town review and process. Just trying to think of the right adjective, the due diligence process that the town has for any time they spend money. Same thing applies to us. And then I've already said it, but the community preservation plan provides most of the details or all of the details of each of these steps. There's a slide that covers it, but again, it's very busy. And I prefer you to just look at the plan where you have a chance to call that screen up and digest it because it's very busy. And the application forms are all on the town's website. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about at this level, and then we'll see what happens from there, is what is the timeline? So we've been working hard to get to the point where we can accept applications. We think we are now on schedule to accept applications for funding at the fall annual town meeting of 2025. So the problem is there's a very condensed time frame. We don't have a lot of time to do all
Is it
these
okay to
steps.
show this one, Bill?
There's a timeline in the lower left. I'm going to read it, but that's again, this is from the community preservation plan. I don't know what page it is, but it's there, and it outlines the timeline. And so May 15, letter of interest will be available online. We have June 20 and June 15, the funding request application opens. So we're going to go through a process where anybody that wants to apply can get that review and evaluation by the community preservation or community economic development.
Yeah.
Community and economic development.
And this is like the informal application?
Yeah.
For the first level? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's
Pretty much.
the letter is May 15th, right? The first step.
It's coming right up.
Friday, right?
That's the expectation we have, yeah, we've been working hard to get this stuff on the website. So then the application's open, they close on August 1. Again, next year, there's expectation, hope for a much longer time frame for folks to really, and they have the whole year. The letter of interest will be available 365 days a year. You can apply anytime. Then the funding process has that beginning and ending, which is, 6 weeks?
Yeah.
June, July, yeah,
So this
And
process
then-
would repeat each year, Bill, is that right?
yes, but with a much, expanded time frame. That's the point. This is a condensed time frame. Next year, we expect, and that's in the plan as well, will be a longer period. Okay, then we have an administrative review. This committee then has an initial review. And we have public hearings, and again, the dates are on the screen. And by the end of October, the fall annual town meeting reviews each application. And again, I said town meeting may approve it as presented, reduce funding, or disapprove. So I was intentionally trying to keep this high level. That's all the high level stuff I wanted to share. I'm open.
Question.
Sure.
So do the applicants have to be from Natick? For example, could an outside developer from another town submit an application, even if, as long as the target is a Natick project?
I haven't had that come up in committee meeting yet. The project is for money to be spent in Natick, so the sponsor could be from out of town. I'm not sure. We'd have to go through that. The letter of interest would clarify that. I think the answer is yes, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Just curious, so we collected, about 2.1 million, you said?
Yes,
That was last year. And then was so every year we're gonna collect roughly that, right?
yes, it will go up a little bit,
Yeah, based on taxes. and stuff.
based on taxes. It goes up because of the surcharge, so you're gonna get a little bit more on the surcharge. But it's 2.5 million roughly if you count the state fund, but we can't count on that. We don't know exactly how that.
But
How that is.
Is it dollar for dollar though from the state, or is it like
No.
whatever's left at the state level, so to speak?
The state has a big formula for how they do it. Last year, I believe the number was 18%. And that's of the money that we've collected
Oh, I see.
locally. But if you're at 2% or 3%, the formula is all different. They have different levels, but we're eligible for this roughly $200,000.
Yeah, I lost where the 18% was, but I get it, yeah.
Yeah, it's the
It's sub-level.
percentage that there's round one, it's this thing, so, and we only qualify for round one.
So
the
Bill,
fund.
so there's two sources of funds, what we collect in taxes and what the state adds on. And that happens each year. And if there was a year when we didn't actually execute a project, the money would just sit there, continue to grow, and the pot would get bigger? Or
That is correct. There is no mandate that we spend anything.
what about that 5%? There was
Uh,
confusion at town meeting about this 5% ad. At the risk of getting us all confused, is that?
Administrative budget is for the Community Preservation Committee to spend as needed to support the work of the committee. So there are a couple of things that we've used in the past and will use in the future. In the past, we hired a consultant to help us get through this community outreach process, again, required by the act. And we are members of the Community Preservation Coalition, which is around $5,000 a year, a little less than that. That provides us access to a huge database of information and live staff that respond quickly and appropriately. So that question about whether an outside entity could submit a proposal that is a Natick issue, they could answer that in 10 seconds. So we can get answers to those questions. I just don't have that in the top of my head. There is a third source, And that is that the monies that are collected are required to be segregated and they can be invested. And last year we collected something like $20,000 of interest. So in addition to the other money, now I didn't finish your question about the 5%. Those are the things we've used on it in the past. In the future, and this is where town meeting got hung up a little bit, we have been using the Community and Economic Development Department for significant resources. Their hope is to hire someone who can work with us half-time roughly. And we are able and willing and would like to support that position with money. That was what the town meeting discussion was all about. That would, my expectation, and I don't have hard numbers, is that would not be, it might be half or a little more, not all of the money that we had put in the town meeting note. Some money would go to the coalition for our annual dues, and the rest of the money is either spent on something we feel we need, a study or council or whatever. If we don't spend it, it goes back in the pot. So it's not lost to the town, it's not lost to the Community Preservation Committee. And in the year that we're in, just ending, we're not going to spend all that money and it will go back into the pot. So any administrative funds not used revert to the bigger pie, that pie chart, the other categories.
Yeah, it's just a max basically. You don't have to, yeah, it's just a maximum that you can spend.
The 5% is a maximum. The committee is not inclined to try and figure out how to spend it. They're inclined to save it for future use if we don't need it. And Brinley has her hand and we have one here to carry.
Who's up first?
I don't know.
You.
Carrie, you're up.
Yeah, kind of went through the whole alphabet soup, the CPA, the CPC, and then there's the Native Housing Trust.
Right.
And then there's a Native Affordable Housing Trust, and I help manage a piece of property on Bacon Street for them. And there's 5 Auburn Street is something that's been point of contention. Might that factor into this whole process, or too soon to tell?
The process is that folks like the Housing Trust and the what's the other one?
Affordable Housing Trust.
Affordable Housing Trust and the there's 2
Housing
entities.
Authority.
Housing Authority, thank you. Are both entities that could apply for funds that support community affordable housing. There are also nonprofits that might ask for money to support programs that they have. So
Yet to be determined.
to be determined, but we don't give out money. We ask folks to submit requests for money, then we evaluate them. So that's, you know, I'm trying to reach out so people know about it, but I'm not, the committee can't recommend a project.
Yeah. One of the things I just
Sure.
at town meetings, sort of, you know, I can just imagine if they sort of, there's a debate about reducing the amount of funding, you know, point of order, and then up for discussion. I can imagine this discussion taking place on the floor of town meeting. That could open up a whole can of worms.
I was surprised at how many questions we got when all I wanted to do was get the administrative funds approved. I chose not to do an introductory statement, and that may have been a error on my part. I was advised not to, and I
just
chose
did
not
the
to.
town meeting on Thursday night just to sort of see how Jeff was doing compared to Frank, and then when I saw all the different, how long it went on, just, you know, talking about punctuation and then all the motions that were like.
Let's get to Brinley's question and then Pat's. Brinley?
Yeah, mine's back with the talking about the administrative funds. As I'm understanding it, my guess is that you'll just every year ask for the administrative funds, because if you don't ask for them, then you would have to have a special town meeting or a special something else in order to get them. And since you're only allowed 5% a year, I'm guessing that you'll just ask every year so that you have funds if you need them, because if we don't appropriate them to you, then you guys could be stuck without administrative funds.
Exactly right.
So how come it's not just automatic?
It's not automatic.
Oh my
We have to ask for the money.
So it's not a project, obviously.
It's not a project, yeah. So that, and the administrative funds are different significantly in that the Community Preservation Committee authorizes the expenditure after town authorizes us to do that. The other projects are all are specifically reviewed and approved by town meeting. But the administrative funds are administered by the committee. So if we need, feel we need something during the year, we don't have to go to town meeting to get permission to spend $5,000 to support our coalition. We just do it after we get permission. So yes, Brinley, every year we do that. The other thing I didn't mention, I think it's really important, and maybe it'll cut off some questions, maybe not. The Community Preservation Act provides a lot of flexibility around funding. I didn't really talk about this, but we get into this annual amount. 1.5 million, roughly, a little bit less maybe, that we can spend according to these rules with the buckets and all of that. But the committee has the authority to request, again, all approved by town meeting, to request town meeting to advance funds. We can actually borrow funds from future cash flows to fund a large project if we choose to do that and if the town supports us. So we can use money that we have in the bank account, we can ask for the current year appropriation, we can ask for a loan or and I don't know the details, but I know we can tap future revenues to fund a project. So there's a lot of flexibility up to the committee and the town. Pat.
That's pretty interesting. I wanted to let you know that Amanda has now joined as well. So, but yes, Pat, go ahead.
That's fascinating, Bill. I'm just curious, is it your the committee's operation or your I don't know if you have somebody who's kind of an administrator of your CPA, you know, is that somebody that you can actually hire, or you said you hired a consultant for this and that, but is that similar to say other towns, what other towns are doing with their CPA?
Yes, we relied in our early phases looking at a lot of other Community Preservation Act towns to see what they do. And a lot of them use administrative funds to support their operations, basically. Because we haven't even talked about what happens when we appropriate this money. We need to manage it. We want to make sure that that money is spent for what it was intended. And that's not something 9 volunteers can do very well.
Right.
So Amanda and the Community and Economic Development is expecting to hire a person who is going to help us do that management as well as the review and evaluation process that as staff input to the Community Preservation Committee.
Thanks. Yep.
Anne, did you comment, have a question?
Yeah, hi. So I've been very excited about the CPA of CPC ever since I saw it come up to vote. What I didn't realize that I learned, from this call is how long of a journey it's been just to bring it into Natick. So considering it's been a while, I'm really curious to hear if there are any exciting projects that you've heard about from other towns, from anyone on this call, basically. Anything that excited you in particular about cases where the funds were used?
I can't answer that well. I've been focused on the process in Natick. Amanda, who has joined us apparently, may want to jump in if you don't mind, Amanda, with some, because she's been looking at this and as I said, it's support for us. Amanda, do you have any thoughts on this question?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was trying to say something while I was
sorry.
listening.
Yeah, so I'm just does anyone have any examples from other towns about how these funds have been used? Anything that excites you?
Yeah, so there are a lot of great projects throughout the Commonwealth using CPA funds. The city of Boston has done a lot in terms of restoration of old church and historic homes, as has Newton. And then also other communities off the top of my head, I don't know the exact names, but have been able to acquire like farms or very large open space parcels, which would have been lost to development if not acquired or preserved underneath the CPA Act. But I can get you a list. We do have on the Community Coalition website, there is an entire list of projects that communities have been doing. And also another cool thing that other CPAs have been doing is putting signage. So if you go through the city of Boston, you go by a CPA project, they actually have a sign that says funded with CPA funds. And it kind of gives you an idea of what it goes into. I haven't gone as far as seeing the sign on their website, but I would assume it's something where it gives you the details about the project, which is something that this CPC would hope to do, is do signage, but then also give you the background story if you went into that project. And I can give you the link if you'd like. Let me just pull it up.
Oh yeah, there's also a couple of links that Brinley and I posted in the chat. Yeah, I was just fascinated by just the breadth of different projects that other towns have done, like anything from old farms to river issues, things like that. To it's just been really amazing to see what's possible. I had no idea.
Yeah, and in particular, the link you put in to the Community Preservation Coalition on creating accessible and inclusive playgrounds with CPA. I know a lot of residents have expressed a strong preference for doing something with the Johnson Playground space. It kind of goes back to the question of who can submit these projects. Bill, I think you said if citizens wanted to submit a project idea, it was maybe tougher sledding or a lot more that
Yeah, it kind of sounded like
to
maybe it's
do
at
that.
least a Parks and Rec at minimum, and then a more organized entity, sounded
Yeah, so
like.
they've got to partner with somebody to do that, perhaps, or
Well, they have to have authority over the property. So
okay.
you can't.
Wait. So does that mean select board applies, or how does that work?
I mean, yeah, maybe we can take that as like a case in point. Say there were a bunch of committed residents who really wanted to make that Johnson Playground, an inclusive or, some of the funds to really vamp that up. How would they go about doing that? What would they do? They need to find a community partner or what?
Well, the first thing they'd have to do is go to Rex and Park and get their buy-in.
Okay.
They'd have to make sure the owner of the property, which is the town of Natick, was on board, which may involve the select board. So they have to build a coalition basically so that they have the authority and the permission to do what they want to do. And the endorsement, because FinCom and the town meeting is not going to think highly if somebody recommends a project and the town says, that's a terrible idea. Not going to go very far. Probably will not get through the committee. So we're looking for those kinds of synergies and support. The other thing I didn't mention is that there's a preference for projects that cover more than one of the areas. So open space and affordable housing or historic preservation and I don't know what. That might be open space, perhaps depending on the parcel.
Or housing.
Or housing.
The way
So,
our bylaw Auburn is.
yeah.
Cut off three.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's all built into the way we evaluate the projects, which again is outlined in the plan.
Okay. Brian, I know you have your hand up.
Yeah, getting into the weeds a little bit here, but my interest is Lake Cochituate and developing that asset. Camp Mary Bunker, JJ Lane with its two adjacent pieces of property that are kind of wasted there. If they could be acquired and added to that park, I think it would be so impactful. Would that be something that the CPA would that be the realm, or would you have to work through the DCR and the Parks and Recs and kind of start in a different playing field rather than working with the CPA on that? But I think those two parks with their access to the lake and being relatively undeveloped would be a great place for Natick to improve its assets for the town citizens. You know, you could have canoe and kayak put-ins there. It would bring you out of the madness of the main park on Route 30. You know, that's so crushed with people during the summer that the locals kind of avoided, I think, because of knowing that. If you could give these assets that are available and haven't been developed, I think would be a great opportunity for the town to give something back to its people. You know, that's kind of my wish list. And in turn with that, that there might be a little bit of consciousness rising saying, oh, we need to do something about water quality. So you'd have this kind of add-on impact that would be a big, big plus. And, you know, they spent $2.5 million on that new boat ramp. And you could develop those little canoe and kayak probably for less than $1 million for a start, you know, to get things going. And just my wishful thinking, thinking about the lake. And it seems like that would be a perfect tie-in for the CPA from my point of view.
Yeah, again, Brian, the legal questions are who owns that land that you're talking about? And do you have permission to develop it? So if that's owned by DCR, then right off the bat, you have to go to DCR and get them to say, oh, this is a great idea, we endorse it. And knowing DCR, that might take a few days. 30 years.
Yeah.
But, you know, your idea is right on point. That's the way we want to, creative way we want to use these funds. The problem is that we have to get all the ducks lined up. We have to get permission. We have to get approval and endorsements from the various entities that are responsible for this land and that would be developing it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean,
It's just a lot of work that to dig through that and get to that point because, you know, getting somebody to respond from DCR or DOT, the parties involved, it gets kind of sluggish.
Brian, the land you're talking about is owned by the state?
Well, Camp Mary Bunker, I believe, is the town of Natick. The access in that little piece, but that's, you know, the lake is state property. But there's that little piece of shoreline there.
Lane, what's JJ Lane?
That's already done though, Jay. That's down on
Bean Street.
Swing
It has a 40-foot border along the eastern edge of waterfront park property that is separated from the park by a rusty, broken down chain link fence because it's part of the National Guard property that they acquired a long time ago and nobody's made an effort to give it back to the town. They said security, but I think the security issue has been kind of superseded by other things. And it's just a matter of getting somebody to get interested to get it back for the town. But on the northern side of that park, there's also a piece of property about 40 feet wide that was just kind of a no man's land that's full of junk concrete that the town has left there. And I see it as, why park it there? Move it to one of the big yards and give that piece of parkland to the park rather than having a junk pile there. It's
park
just
was finished like 5 or 6 years ago. It's really nice. You can walk around, there's a playground, volleyball nets.
It just kind of, it doesn't make sense to me to have a nice park bordering on these derelict areas when they could be used and improve the park.
Yeah.
I did put the links for both of those parks in the chat, and they have a map on them if people are curious about where he's talking about.
Thanks, Brendan. Pat, you had your hand up again.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the really interesting proposal we talked about a few years ago, I think, here at Coffee with a Purpose, the development of veterans housing at the Henry Wilson Cobbler Shack property. And I think there was a lot of confusion and conflict between boards and town groups. Like, it's designated to be recreational property. They can't be, they tried to get that changed. I don't know where it ended up, but it sounded like a really good idea. And the veterans also have a couple of pretty large parking areas, one over at AMVETS and the big one on 135. And there was a discussion about perhaps building some affordable housing dedicated to veterans or prioritized for veterans, in Natick. But I don't know where that got or went anywhere or what.
Resource factors that the Henry Wilson author shops for their lines were included.
Yeah, I don't know what to say, Pat. Again, it's a matter of lining up the ducks and identifying the property and the interested parties and getting them to agree that this is a good idea. And then there might be money available.
That's it.
Here, Carrie?
It's maybe a question more for Amanda. I was just curious, that large plot of land on Union Street, which is now, it's a school, I believe, at
St. Benedict's.
St. Benedict, thank you. I go to you and Woodland if I'm heading towards down that way, but I guess if the CPA had been in existence years ago, might that piece of property been just preserved as open space and not become a school? At least it's not a large condominium project, I should say that.
Well, I think that you could say that about any property that's changed hands in the last 10 years. You know, what we have to do is look forward and see if we can identify those properties at risk in time to do something about it. We're thinking in terms of a funding cycle of once a year. So that's tough when you're talking about real estate transactions. But it's the way, well, we do have provisions, just so Amanda doesn't correct me on this. We do have a provision for an expedited process if there's a time-sensitive project. So if something came on the market, we could just identify that issue, hold our hearings, do our due diligence, do all our processing, and then submit it to spring annual town meeting. We don't want to do a lot of that, but that's a perfect example where time is of the essence and we might be able to consider something.
Whitney Hollow is down in the organic community farm. Is that, it's no longer a plant shop, right? Is that any sense what that will become, or is it just?
I'm sorry.
Windy Hollow, that if you.
Wendy Lowe.
Windy Low.
That's a housing development.
It is, okay.
Yeah,
That's built now. That's, yeah, that was.
Okay.
That was on the table 5 years ago. You missed the boat.
I did,
Yeah.
okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Judy?
Judy's got her hand up. Judy, do you want to weigh in with something?
Hey there, I'm multitasking today and on my phone, so apologies if I missed this detail. I've been following this process fairly closely since the summer. And I'm wondering how close we are to getting the finalized CPC plan up on the website with details about the letter of interest process.
I shared the latest information I have, but Amanda, have you got an update for us on when that letter of interest will be on the web?
Hopefully, yeah, today or tomorrow. That's what I'm doing right now, is just doing a final one, spell check, but two, also making sure all the graphics are not pixely, because we did have a little bit of a problem with a couple of the graphics look great when you had them in, and then you printed them and look not great. So either today or tomorrow.
So that's.
And will there be a push notification on that if we're following CPC news through the town website?
Yeah, we'll get Jay to push out that information as well.
Thank you so much.
That's for both.
And Amanda, will that be on the website, the town website page that I just posted, that information? Go on that page?
It'll be going on the CPA, I think, webpage. I'm gonna try to merge both those together.
And that, what Amanda's talking about is both this community preservation plan, which details all the process we're going through, and the letter of interest. So that's the two things you'll need, Judy, to move forward with any projects that you want to propose.
Right, thank you.
Cindy here in the.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Cindy.
You have a slide showing the members, their names.
I don't have a slide, but I have their names in front of me.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I can bring that up. That was.
I don't think you have the members, but anyway, I'll
Oh,
go.
there's a
through.
member roster right here, isn't this?
Oh, on the town website.
Well,
Yeah.
sure, but you can't read it, so
Okay.
You can go on the website or you can listen to me. Representing the planning board is Terry Evans. I think most of us know who she is. Steve Evers is the vice chair and the historical commission representative. Sarah Hanna, our own Sarah Hanna, is our clerk. Michael Downey is the Conservation Commission representative. David Hiller, Recreation and Parks Commission representative. David Krentzman is a member at large. Jose Montemayor is our financial person and also a member at large. I'm on it, and we currently have a vacancy of the Housing Authority representative. They are meeting in May and hopefully will give us a name so we can be our full 9-member team.
So, Bill, I wanted to ask you about that. So those are 3-year terms, is that right? And
There's, yes.
and what happens, given that you all have that same initial appointment date? Is there going to be some process for rotating just portions of the committee out at different years?
We talked to town folks about this recently. 7 of us were given 3-year terms and 2 of us were given 2-year terms. There's an effort now to straighten that out so that we get 3 each year, as most committees in Natick are designed to be. I don't know what happened when I think all the committees just appointed people for 3 years. And nobody said you can't do that. So I'm up and one other person is up. Not maybe David, I'm not sure who. And they'll make us either 1 or 3 years to try to get us in sync. But that's in the works, and yes, there's 9 members, ideally 3 each year.
Yeah,
Yeah, and this is sort of might be in your plan and it's sort of a process question, but given town meeting members' tendency to get into the weeds on things, have you talked about maybe a best practice in terms of how many projects you might submit at a time for them to review?
We are flying in the dark. We've never had a project submitted. We don't know whether we're gonna get 2 or 20. I think that the evaluation process, and as we go through it and read and understand what's being proposed, we're gonna have to make those judgments. Do we wanna have, do we wanna spend all the money? Do we wanna spend part of it? Do we wanna fund this $1 million project, or are these $300,000 projects more valuable to the town? Again, the screen is what's the most benefit to the most folks in the town. And that again is all laid out in the plan. So I can't answer that question.
I know Judy's got her hand up, but before we go to that, I'm concerned about that a little bit in terms of town meetings' ability to go to the weeds. I'm wondering whether I've forgotten the name of it, but that larger forum of other towns that you can share experience and resources with have any insight or guidance for that of how to, or maybe that all depends on how other towns are organized for who has ultimate approval authority. But I could so easily imagine that folks are either, they're just going to be champions for the one thing they want and not be willing to vote for something else. But maybe I'm just being pessimistic on a Monday morning.
Well, remember that each project gets reviewed by the CPC and then again by the Finance Committee. And as we know, the Finance Committee has a lot of good folks on it who ask a lot of tough questions. So there's some vetting going on there, significant. And as I say, this is our first year. We have no idea what we're going to get, and we're going to wing it. We're gonna be have a thoughtful, careful process to try to parse this out. And town meeting is town meeting. I mean, the members can do whatever they want. I was surprised at how many questions I got on that one simple request for the administrative. So we'll see.
I think maybe we're still smarting from the override, but Judy, did you want to ask another question or make comments?
This is my comment's now a little bit removed from Bill's presentation of the members. I just wanted to remind folks that Steve Evers stepped down as vice chair of the committee, and David Krentzman is now vice chair of the committee, if my notes on the last meeting are correct.
Did I misspeak? Sorry. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Very good.
So is.
I know it's a change.
I'm
No,
sorry.
he's at large.
Okay, so so the historical commission person is not?
Oh, no, Steve just resigned as
Oh, as vice chair.
vice chair.
Okay, got
He's
it.
still on the
Okay,
committee.
Sorry, thank you.
And as I said, we have one vacancy from the Housing Authority that will be hopefully filled this month.
Hmm.
Martin has a question.
Yeah.
It's a comment, but you've been on town meetings, so you can probably respond just as easily. And you're not still on it, so.
No.
So one of the things about town meeting is everybody is quickly seen is if you have a $200 million town budget, it probably goes through pretty quickly with some questions asked. But if you have a $5,000 item, they're gonna ask every little detailed question about what vendor do you have? When did the proposal come in? Is it the end of blah, 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 and they'll go on for hours. So, you know, perhaps the strategy here is to put these as a package saying, we vetted them, with FinCom vetted them, here they are. Rather than go through each detail of each
The law
item.
says you can't, right?
You can't, yeah.
I was familiar with that concept decades ago when there was discussion that a company wants to build a $20 million plant, board approves it.
Yeah.
They got a $200 petty cash fund, the board spends an hour talking about it. It's that people understand a $70,000 administrative budget. That's a number I can handle.
Got it, yeah.
200 million? No clue. That's a dynamic we have. Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the act requires us to have the town vote on each and every project. So if there are 10 projects, there are gonna be 10 motions for 10 different, each one will be
Yeah.
approve as stated, reduce it, which is really gonna be fun when people start wanting to reduce it,
Yeah.
or say just no, and I believe it's a majority vote.
Unfortunately,
Amanda had to
to
step
leave,
away
so-
for a meeting.
Yeah, Amanda's no longer on, unfortunately, but yeah.
I hear about Weston and I'm pretty sure that it has to be each one separately.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Again, these are great questions, but thank God for the coalition.
Yeah.
And I think, Bradley, did you put a generic community preservation coalition web reference? Because that's their homepage.
And did.
I did.
Thank you. Thank you. That is just a wealth of information that is available to the public.
Actually, another question.
Yes, sir.
Are there restrictions on like where all the money's just sitting there unused, what it's like invested in? Because
There are restrictions. Bill Ramage has had some discussions with the town about that.
I don't mean like stocks or anything like that risky, but
We're-
you know, the interest rate was only like less than 1%, when
Yeah.
rates are like 4%, like for safe stuff now.
The answer I've received on that is that the Department of Revenue requires that the funds invested by towns be insured, fully insured. So FDIC insures 250,000, we got 200 or 100 million, or I'm sorry, 1 million or 2 million. So we don't have quite the same rules that we would have if we were citizens or so on. We did some research on that. There is an entity that has been approved by the Department of Revenue to invest CPC funds that yields 4% plus. We're getting 3.7.
Still not terrible, but yeah.
Which is a lot better than when we started.
Yeah.
It was $20,000 plus the last I saw. So the money is being invested. There are state regulations and rules about how it can be invested. The town is doing the best they can and we're getting the benefit.
Well, but you're saying. now
That's
you're-
a really important point, that they're insured funds, so that they would not go into market investments.
Well, you can spread out 2 million plus in one place in different CDs.
The problem the town has is that we're a $2 million issue in a $200 million budget. So they're not gonna spend all their time and energy trying to maximize to get from 20,000 a year to 25,000 a year. They got a bigger issue.
4% is 90,000, but anyway, yeah.
Well,
That's a good chunk
the
of money.
difference would only be
70.
no, it would be 0.7%,
No, you're,
roughly.
well, I don't wanna argue about it now, but.
Okay, I've done this,
Okay.
but I may have misquoted you the numbers, but we're at 1 million now, 1,000,002 now,
Oh, okay.
working on 2, okay, approaching 2 million.
Hmm.
So,
Well, thank you so much, Bill. It's complex, clearly. And yeah, I think once projects come forward, then it's going to get even more interesting. But
Cindy has another question.
sure.
So I didn't go to town meeting, so when you went to town meeting, you asked for $70,000?
Correct.
And that's because you knew how you wanted to spend $70,000?
We knew from the get-go, this is just FYI for everyone.
Yeah.
We knew from the get-go that the town was gonna be supporting the committee.
Yes,
And that there would be a request to fund part of a position to help
yes,
do that.
yeah,
The first round, we had no authorization to spend money. The Community Economic Development Department funded a
Yeah.
position to support us. That person had left, Amanda took over and has done a terrific job. They're in the process of hiring someone to
Yeah.
do this work.
yes,
So once that happens, we're gonna be supporting that, not paying full amount, but supporting it.
yes.
That is not gonna be the full 70,000.
Okay,
So that's where we are. I don't have an exact number as a request from the town,
okay,
or the committee doesn't.
yeah, okay.
But the idea is, we're being supported, we need to support them to the extent we can.
So,
And other towns do this, most.
and how much, what would 5% be? That's way less than 5%?
Well, 5% of the money this year was the 70,000.
It is, okay,
Yeah.
so it was,
So
okay,
we
you may not spend it all.
we don't expect to spend it all.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Rick's got his hand up.
Let's talk about artificial turf.
No, not exactly. I have a small in the weeds question about the coalition, what information we can get off the coalition website, and then a more strategic question about that can probably be answered quickly first, which is you know, the administrative funds have to be reapplied for every year. If there were a project that was, for instance, an affordable housing project that was really expensive, and there were other things that year that were also compelling, you'd have to, if you didn't spend some money that you needed to spend on the housing side of it, if you just held that money out, you couldn't really reserve that money again another year, right? You'd have to reapply for the money the next year. There would be more money as a result of not having spent the money, but you can't earmark future years' money with an approval from town meeting in a current year. So for instance, as an example, if something like 5 Auburn Street funding fell through and the town wished to go through with that and submitted a CPC application, but it was a lot of money over a lot of years, would you be able to sort of start the project with the assurance that you could, complete the project in future years with CPC money or CPA money, or would you have to reapply every year and risk starting something and not being able to finish it, and therefore not even wishing to start it? That's a bit of a complex question. Sorry to hit you with that.
Well,
I don't have anything specific in mind. I'm just curious about, the reapplication process each year.
We actually did talk about that, Rick. We're constrained by the request that comes in to us. So if the request comes into us, and we know it's part of a larger project, we have to look at that. We have that flexibility I mentioned earlier around
Borrowing.
future, from future revenue streams. And then we have the issue around how do we balance the money so that it's spent fairly and benefits the town to the greatest extent, all of that stuff. But we talked about if somebody needed money for on a continuing basis, how they would go about requesting that. And what we don't want is the scenario you described, where somebody says, well, I need 60,000 a year, I'll ask for 60 this year, and I'll ask for 60 next year. They get the 60 this year, and next year we don't have the 60.
Right.
So the things we're kicking around is, okay, can you ask for 180 over 3 years? So that it would be dispersed 60 a year, but we get the authorization from town for the whole amount. So we
Right.
have a lot of flexibility in that. When we look at individual projects, we have council, we have the coalition, we have the expertise on the staff, on the committee. And we'll use those resources to try and figure out the best way to move forward. We don't want to start a project and then have it fail.
So that's what the borrowing, it doesn't mean literally going to a bank and borrowing money. Because that was, when you first said borrowing, but I think you said borrowing from future years. So it basically means allocating future funds in a current year is basically what you're saying.
Well,
is that right?
I'm not sure, and that would have to go to the town.
Okay.
The fund has a certain amount of money in it.
Right.
If we ask for town authorization for more money than is in there, the town's gonna have to borrow it, which is a whole nother set of issues. That would have to go through the whole process the town goes through whenever they borrow money.
Right.
If we're using the money within the fund,
Mm-hmm.
I think unless we accept that we have to keep those 10% buckets.
Okay, so you could do both, really. You could ask to literally borrow more money in a fiscal year, in a given CPA year, fiscal year, whatever, or you could borrow future CPA funds, knowing that they would be there in a future year. It sounds like, I think you answered my question, I think. I think that was very, I'm clear enough for now, certainly. The other in the weeds question was, I went to the coalition site and just searched quickly, this not exhaustively at all, about athletic fields in CPA towns that might have been funded. I didn't come up with anything. I came up with sort of, the plans for, things that might, it's kind of the same thing that you're doing, sort of description of what might fall under recreation in Lexington, for example. And there were a bunch of different things, but nothing specific. It was more like criteria stuff, like who it has to serve and, things like that. There wasn't any need specific to Lexington that was in there. Is that something that that we can use the coalition for, or do we go through you or the committee to find out from the coalition the answer to a question like which towns that we might talk to have actually funded athletic fields through CPA funds?
That's an interesting question. The committee is the entity in the town that has contracted with the coalition for support. We support them, they support us. I don't know the answer to your question. You certainly, everyone should feel free to use the search function within the coalition to get as much information as you want. If there's a specific question, I know I can ask and get an answer. I don't know whether you could ask and get an answer. But you could
theoretically also, I don't know if Amanda's still here, but as staff person, it would be, it's kind of awkward to go to a committee member and ask them to do research for you, So the committee might decide to do research after they saw a proposal and say, we need to see what some other towns, how they reacted to this. But anyway, that's to be determined, but it sounds like something that a staff person might be able to find out on behalf of a resident or whatever, or a town body. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how firm our process is, but we do have, or we should have a process where if someone asks a question, we respond.
Okay, thanks, Bill. You've done a great job. Thank you. This is very complicated future for you guys. Thank you for doing the work.
Can I just-
Yeah, actually, I'd like to echo that. Great job. I mean, Bill, you're a brave person to take on the chair of a brand new committee for a brand new process for the town. That's sure to be
Or
contentious
foolish,
in
or
some part.
foolish.
Or foolish. Well, I'm gonna go with brave. So
Okay, yeah.
Cindy,
really appreciate you. Yeah.
We got Cindy here as a question.
I just want to add a comment that, for some reasons, I have used the coalition website. And it's excellent. And the search capability is excellent, and you can find projects that you're interested in. And then every town that has the CPA has a website that's really good.
Right.
And every town meeting all over the Commonwealth, or in cities, it's different, but they have to provide all of this information. So if it's not very hard for you to do your own research, and I would start with the coalition because they have an amazing website.
Thank you,
But
Cindy.
also,
So
Cindy
that's
would
something
have
that,
posted database for the whole state as well.
great. Thank you.
So I just wanted to say, because the coalition was the first website I posted, I just reposted the coalition website again so that it's down at the bottom of the chat. And then earlier in the chat, I did post several pages where you can see where the state lists every project that's ever been done. So it is actually pretty easy to do homework about
Great.
this.
Thank you, Brinley.
Good. Well, again, thanks, Bill, for presenting. Thanks for taking on the legwork. Thanks for all these good questions and feedback. Looking forward to how it goes. I think that kind of concludes us for this topic. Next week, we're going to be having our new town clerk, Andrew. How is his last name pronounced? Gabral? Or I'm not entirely sure of that. Gobriel? Okay. So looking forward to having him join us, and then amazingly, we'll already be at Memorial Day. So.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I missed everything.
You can watch the recording.
I will watch.